And now we can take that energy and enthusiasm into our next segment delivered by Eric Bailey. Eric is the president and CEO of Bailey Strategic Innovation Group, an outstanding OD strategy consulting firm. His passion and purpose are all about improving the lives of leaders everywhere. He is an author and the creator of the Principles of Human Understanding. I have personally gotten to know Eric, have worked with him, and I continue to be in awe of his ability to combine fact and emotion to support the human condition. He is overall an incredible teacher, leader, and
Jeez.
Uh-oh. Okay,
People
so
could go on mute. That would be great. Thanks.
yes, thank you. Okay, Eric. Eric is actually not here with us today. He's with us in spirit. He had a long time ago planned a 3-week vacation. He's visiting all of the national parks. I think he's going to hit most of them in the United States. He calls it his epic adventure. So he's there right now. He's with us in spirit, but he recorded this LFC talk with healing in mind. We talked about it a lot, especially in relation, as Howard had mentioned, from our collective hurt from a diversity standpoint. He begins his LFC talk by relaying that so many of our traditional diversity trainings fall short in helping us to collectively heal and repair because they do not empower us to think bigger enough and shift our mental models or the lens through which we see the world. We still can tend to harbor so much anger, shame, or guilt, which only expands our own pain and our collective pain. So his shift that he challenges us about helps us to heal and repair together through the awareness, empathy, and radical curiosity that activates our ability to unite and change the world. So let's collectively welcome our community friend, Eric Bailey. I got this for you.
My name is Eric M. Bailey, and I'm sure you're aware of this, but most diversity training doesn't work. My favorite quote of all time comes from Albert Einstein, and he said, "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them." Now, this is often misquoted as Einstein's definition of insanity, doing the same things over and over again, expecting a different result. He actually never said that. He said this. And what it means is that as adults or as humans, we have this natural tendency to develop patterns of behaviors and habits. And then sometimes those patterns of behaviors will get us into trouble. And then to get out of trouble, we employ the same patterns of behaviors and the same habits, which makes no sense. And so if you want different outcomes, then the process needs to be different. And if you're anything like me, you have sat through, and I use these words intentionally, sat through dozens of diversity trainings or bias trainings or sensitivity trainings or inclusion trainings over the course of your career. And they produce the same kinds of results. So if I know anything, I know that if you want different results, then the process needs to be different. So this session, very, very short session, is designed to be different, to spark a new way of thinking. And so to help illustrate that, I'm not going to explain who I am or why I deserve to be here. I actually want to start with an exercise in economics. So take down your notes or your piece of paper, and I want you to write down the first US company worth over $1 trillion. That's $1 trillion. There's a certain age group that actually gets that joke and loves it. Okay, now what I want you to do, I'm going to give you a couple of options here. And I want you to tell me which is the first US company worth over $1 trillion, Amazon, Apple, Exxon, GE, Google, Microsoft, or Walmart. And then I want you to put down a number right next to it, which is your level of confidence in your answer. All right, Amazon, Apple, Exxon, GE, Google, Microsoft, or Walmart. All right, the answers. The first US company worth over $1 trillion of market capitalization is Apple Inc. Congratulations if you got it right. All right, follow-up question, a little bit easier here. If I showed you the Apple logo in a lineup, would you recognize it? This one's a little simpler, just a yes or no, but then also write down what is your level of confidence. Right? Now, as we do this, you may want to cheat and look at your phone or whatever, but I think that most people, and as I've been doing this around the country, around the world, most people would say, yes, 10 out of 10 confidence, which is obvious, right? So with that very high confidence, I would love you to tell me which of these is the Apple logo. What you're experiencing right now is your confidence fading away, right? You're experiencing the space between the illusion of certainty and the reality of newly presented information. This space is what I call the oh crap gap. And the oh crap gap is important because it lets us realize that even though we want to believe that we're correct, we may not be. And that oh crap gap feeling is like, oh crap, maybe I don't know. I ask this question all over the world, and almost everybody says, yes, 10 out of 10 confidence. And then I show them the options, and they're like, oh crap, maybe I don't know. All right. Now, what's going on here? Before I get into it, I want to introduce you to a very large number. That's 11,201,000 bits. Now, a bit is the basic form of computer information. It comes from the phrase binary digit, and that squishes down to the word bit. All right. Now, bits are the ones and zeros, the binary of computer language. Now, as it turns out, our eyes, our visual system, takes in the equivalent of 10 million bits of information every single second. Our skin, another 1 million bits of information, followed by our ears and our noses, another 200,000 bits of information. And then finally, our taste buds take another 1,000 bits of information. So all told, our brain is receiving the equivalent of 11,201,000 bits of information every single second. But the maximum amount of information that our brains can consciously process is only 50 bits of information, which means that almost all of our processing, or 99.99995%, is unconscious. And so to expedite our cognition or make sense of the world around us, our brains take shortcuts and jump to conclusions. In psychology, we call these heuristics. Now, heuristics are defined as an experience-based strategy for solving problems or making decisions that often proves an efficient means of finding an answer, but cannot guarantee a correct outcome. Now, I teach what are called the principles of human understanding. Essentially, these are 22 principles that are the brain science and psychology behind leadership, communication, collaboration, and relationships. Now, whenever I say relationships, people are like, oh, you're talking about romantic relationships. And yes, it can be applied in that arena. But I'm talking about any time two humans are relating, that's a relationship. Now, we don't have enough time to go through all 22 of the principles, but if you are a geek and you want to dive deeper into it, you can grab my book. It's called The Cure for Stupidity, Using Brain Science to Explain Irrational Behavior at Work. But we are going to hit a few of these principles as we go through our quick session today. And the first one is called the illusion of certainty. And the illusion of certainty is our brain's propensity to project certainty into the world, even if there is none. So when I ask you, which of these is the Apple logo, or would you be able to recognize it? Your brain locks into certainty and says, yes, I know. And then you see the options, you're like, maybe I don't. Right? The illusion of certainty faded away. Now, I know there's some very high detail people that need to know, and it is number 9. So if you said anything other than that, you'd be incorrect, but that doesn't matter. Getting it right is not the most important thing. The most important thing is, what did it feel like when you saw all those options? Right? You may come to a session like this and say, I know what to expect. I've been to so many diversity sessions before. I know what you're going to say. I know what I'm going to get out of this. I know your type. Well, maybe that's the illusion of certainty. Because the illusion of certainty makes us say things like, I know. And I want to remind you that maybe you don't. Maybe you don't. And the reason this matters is that 100% of your life has been lived through your experiences and your perceptions of life. 100%. And you've been successful to this point. And so your brain, with the illusion of certainty, says, I know what to expect from the world. And when someone has a different set of experiences, a different way of seeing things, our brain says, that can't be. It's important to recognize that the only things in life you can learn are things you don't yet know. I'm going to say that again because it's critically important. The only things in life you can learn are things you don't yet know. The illusion of certainty makes us believe we know everything already, which means we can't learn anything. All right, so I want to go through this session very briefly and talk about a few different cautions. And the first one's going to come up with this word bias. So I'm going to roll up some caution tape. There are a few words and phrases that will shut down conversations as you go to lead them, or they may show up in your organization. And what do you do? How do you handle them? We need to handle them with caution and understand how to deconstruct them. And first and foremost is the idea of bias. People come into a conversation about bias and say, I know bias equals racism, sexism, homophobia, all of the isms. People say bias is bad. So I'm not a bad person. I don't have bias. Well, yes, you do. Yes, I do. Yes, we all do. Right? This is the first reason diversity training fails, is because people believe that bias is bad, that I don't have bias. Right? Now, people, the next phase, people say, okay, I understand. We all have bias, sure. Bias is bad. How do we stop it? How do we stop bias? We don't stop bias. We don't stop bias because bias is not bad necessarily, right? Bias is actually a psychology term, and it means a strong preconceived notion about someone or something based on information that we have, perceive to have, or that we lack. And these preconceptions are mental shortcuts that the brain creates to expedite information processing, to quickly help it make sense of what it is seeing. Right? So when you start to think about this, bias is a tool that the brain has developed to help it make sense of the world around it. Now, why do we develop this tool? Well, first, let's talk about survival. So let's say we're lost in the jungles of Costa Rica. We've been lost for 3 days. We've run out of water. We've run out of food. We can't find camp. We can't find any civilization. And we know we're probably going to perish. We're hungry, we're thirsty, and we come across this fallen log with these beautiful, juicy red berries. Do we eat those juicy red berries? Nope, probably not. Most of us say absolutely not, because they could be poisonous. That is bias. We don't have that information. It's information that we perceive to have. It's information that we lack, but we took this mental shortcut and said, I'm not going to eat those things because they could kill me. Right? Now imagine if you have to kind of reason your way through. You take a berry, you eat it, and if you don't die, then you know. We're not going to make that choice. You're going to have a bias or a preference to accelerate our cognitive processing. As it turns out, these are called barberries, and they're actually good for acne and good for heart health. Most humans have a natural aversion or bias against unknown red berries. Right? Said another way, bias is a preference to accelerate our cognitive processing time. Now, when we think about this, we think, oh, it's all about psychology, it's all about mental. There's actually neuroscience of bias. So the cells in our brain are called neurons, and they're a special kind of animal cell that can pass along electricity. Now, the moment at which two neurons will touch, that's actually called a synapse. That's where the electricity flows from one cell to another. Now, the more electricity that runs along a synapse, the stronger that synapse gets, and the easier it is for electricity to pass along the next time. So when people say the brain is like a muscle, it gets stronger and stronger the more you work with it. It's not exactly a muscle, but similarly, the more electricity follows along a series of neurons and synapses, the easier it is for electricity to flow there again. And so when you think about bias, it's actually a form of energy efficiency for the brain. The thoughts that we have, the more that we have them, the easier it is for us to have those thoughts. And then we don't have to give as much energy for those thoughts. Or muscular behavior, like signing your name with your dominant hand. A lot easier than signing with your non-dominant hand, because it's more efficient for your neurons to pass that electricity, right? That is the neuroscience of bias. Actually, the more that you do a thing or think a thing, the easier it is for your brain, and the more likely your brain is going to want to do it again. Bias is a preference to accelerate our cognitive processing time. Now, from a scientific standpoint, bias can creep into our assumptions and our evaluations, but from an organizational or a leadership standpoint, bias can lead to some undesirable outcomes. Here's another one: systemic racism. Let's roll out the caution. It's another one of those phrases that can lead people in different directions. What does it mean? Well, first we need to identify, what is a system? A system is a set of things or principles or procedures working together to produce some outcome. And so if the outcomes don't match what you'd expect given the incomes, then we may be dealing with systemic dysfunction. So for example, to start a car is a system, right? You put in fuel, you have oil in the engine, you have a key, you turn the key, you put all of the inputs into the system, and the car doesn't turn on. We've identified systemic dysfunction. The outcomes don't match what you would expect given the inputs. So what you want to do is you want to identify and diagnose the problems. So when you identify systemic dysfunction, you want to go through and then you can diagnose the problem. If the outputs don't match the inputs and the only variable, everything else is held constant, the only variable is race, then we're dealing with systemic racism. Now, if the only variable difference is age, we're dealing with systemic ageism, etc. As it turns out, we know that there are stereotypes about Black people and pain. And this actually comes from the days of slavery, where people thought that Black people could not feel pain. And the African race could not feel pain. And they use that as a justification to the poor treatment of enslaved people. Now, side note, why would you use pain and torture to keep people in line if they couldn't feel pain? That's a story for a different day, all right? But the American Medical Journal of Ethics recently did a study a couple of years ago that was essentially for doctors, by doctors, about doctors, and they studied pain outcomes and race. And they identified that doctors were more likely to delay the prescription of pain medication if a patient was Black than if a patient was white. More likely to prescribe smaller doses if a patient was Black than if a patient was white. Veterans who came back from wars with osteoarthritis got smaller doses of pain medication and shorter prescriptions if they're Black than if they're white. Children who had tonsillectomies and adenoidectomies, more likely to have their pain medication delayed, not prescribed at all, or smaller doses. Even people in hospice care, same thing. If they're Black, they're white, different outcomes. And so we're looking at that, and we look at systemic dysfunction. Now, I don't think that any one doctor is acutely racist or every doctor is racist. That's not what we're talking about. We have to zoom out and look at the data. The data will help us indicate whether or not we have some systemic dysfunction, all right? Now, the next idea I want to talk with you about is the idea of white privilege, another caution phrase. I ask people all over the country from all different walks of life how they feel about this phrase, and I get a huge range of emotion from it makes me angry to it makes me guilty, it makes me sad, it makes me frustrated, I understand it, it exists, it doesn't exist, the whole range of things. Now, here's why I caution you about this phrase, is because unfortunately, it is sonically similar to the phrase, a life of privilege, which means you're born with a silver spoon in your mouth, you've never had to work for anything in your life. Now, in this context, in the context of leading conversations about diversity and inclusion, privilege does not mean that you haven't struggled in life. It doesn't mean that you haven't worked hard to earn what you have earned, or it doesn't explain the kind of person you are. We hear this phrase, white privilege, our first reaction is, every white person is rich. Every white person hasn't had to struggle. Every white person or every non-white person struggles and cannot be successful. That's not what we're talking about. In this context, privilege just means that a member of one group may not have to worry about something that a member who is not of that group may have to worry about. Privilege is not bad. I'm gonna say that again. Privilege is not bad. Okay, so I've got 3 kids. And part of my job as a parent is to make sure that my kids have a better life growing up than I did, right? So if I'm walking down the street and I sprain my ankle because I step in a pothole, I will turn to the person following me and say, watch out for that pothole, right? Giving them one less worry. The goal of parenting is giving your kids privilege, less worry than you had. The American dream is all about one generation doing better than the previous. The goal of the American dream is privilege. Privilege is not bad, right? But there are infinite ways to label privilege, right? Like we could have handedness privilege. So what might a left-handed person have to worry about that a right-handed person may not? How about buying golf clubs, baseball gloves, scissors, writing, because when you write on a right-handed person, you write and your hand leads the ink on the paper. If you're left-handed, your hand trails the ink on a piece of paper. Right? How about buying a spiral notebook, right? When I'm a right-handed person, I don't care where the spiral is because it's a regular notebook, it's not in my way. A left-handed person, the wrist bones rub along the spiral, so they have to get a special left-handed notebook where the spiral's at the top, right? When you shake hands as a lefty, you're shaking with your non-dominant hand or driving a stick-shift car. Privilege is not bad, right? How about country privilege? Right? Are there privileges coming from different countries? Absolutely. Remember, privilege means a member of one group does not have to worry about something that a member of a different group does, right? So what might a Haitian person have to worry about that American person may not. We'll call this American privilege. How about hurricanes every single year? How about reliable clean drinking water? I have got so much clean drinking water. I wash my pet in clean drinking water. I wash my car in clean drinking water. Right? How about political strife or economic collapse? Right? All things that someone from a different country may have to worry about that I don't. Now, should I feel bad that I'm from this country? No, I actually feel grateful. But it does help me feel something different about somebody else, right? So you start to think about this idea of different kinds of privilege, like how about economic class? And then I'm going to flip the question here. What might a wealthy family not have to worry about that a middle-class family does have to worry about? Most middle-class families in America live paycheck to paycheck. No matter how much they make, they live paycheck to paycheck. Wealthy families don't have to worry about that, right? About one big emergency collapsing the entire financial system, the entire budget. Right? Privilege is not bad. As you start to come back to things like race, what might a white person not need to worry about that a Black person does, right? And so we're talking about privilege. We want to think about privilege is not bad. And so instead of feeling anger or shame or guilt, what if we recognize that if we have privilege, we are experiencing less worry than someone else? So instead of all of these feelings that are kind of debilitating or uncomfortable, what if they made us feel empathy? What if we started to express our empathy for somebody else because they may have a worry that we've never even thought of? And that's the thing about the human brain and the illusion of certainty. Why on earth would we waste our energy worrying about something or thinking about something that we've never had to worry about in our entire lives? That's why it's so hard for us to acknowledge our own privileges, because someone else is suffering or worrying about something that we've never even considered would be a worry. And when someone engages with us and they have an experience outside of our own, the illusion of certainty, our brains say, that can't be. Now I know I teach kind of like drinking from a fire hose. I give you a lot of information in a very short period of time. Sorry, not sorry here. But I don't need you to be an expert in all of this. I just need you to have the power of awareness. Now, awareness is a very, very powerful thing. Now, to help illustrate this will be the last thing we do here today, I want you to look at this image. So somewhere in this image, there is something to be seen. And when you see it, it'll be perfectly clear, totally unambiguous. All right. The thing you're looking for is not a smiley face. It's not a pebble. It doesn't belong there at all. It's a cigar. Now, hopefully that helps some of you see it. All right, so the second hint I'm going to give you is I'm going to drain all of the color out of the image and just leave the brown cigar in the middle. I hope that helps you. Now, if you still can't see the cigar, I can't move forward until everyone sees it, so it's right there. There's the cigar. Now, I'm about to put the image back the way it was before when you couldn't see it. And the crazy thing about awareness is that once you see it, you can never not see it. So you're going to go about your day and your life, and you're going to see the Apple logo and the illusion of certainty. You're going to see a judgment of someone else's experience. You're going to see bias. You're going to see systemic dysfunction. You're going to see privilege. And when you do, I don't need you to be an expert. I just need you to hold on to this idea of radical curiosity, that there's more left for me to learn in this world. I want you to open up and expand your ability to understand somebody else. I want you to believe that there is goodness in the people of the world. And so now, armed with all of this, I want you to go and be the good. Thank you very much. If you'd like to bring a holy shift or dive deeper into any of these concepts or any of the others that are waiting on the other end of this, please feel free to reach out to me. You can reach out to me via email. You can grab me on LinkedIn or whatever. Thank you so much for diving into this work. Thank you for following along. I know I speak fast. Have a great day, and thank you so much for being a leader.
Thank you so much, Eric Bailey, wherever you are in your travels, in your RV or motorhome visiting national parks. I took a ton of notes, and it was, it's really, I feel like I learned a lot and have a lot of passion for some radical curiosity and more empathy, and I have a greater understanding of all of us in this community. So I think Howard is going to take us into our next